Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Faith Focused Weekly Discipleship Podcast. My name is Kevin Rogness, and I'm the Discipleship Director here at Faith Covenant Church. And as always, I'm very thankful that you're choosing to watch or listen today. And I just want to encourage you to subscribe to the podcast, whether you're on YouTube or on any of the other major podcasting platforms, to make sure that you never miss any episodes. So always encourage you to do that. And again, always thankful. Today we're talking about a lot of children's ministry because we have a lot going on that's launching here in the next few weeks. Yep. And so I think it's really important that we talk about that so you know how to be praying for it and just so you know what's going on so that you can get involved in whatever way you and your family need to get involved. So I'm not the expert on that, so I thought I should bring in the expert. Okay. So this is Sarah Sosa. She's our children's pastor, and I'm very excited. This is your first time on our podcast.
It is my first time. I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah.
So we love Sarah. When did you start at Faith again?
A year and a half-ish ago. It was January of 2021.
Okay.
2021.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's been a while then, so.
Yeah.
And let's just kind of get to know you a little bit.
Okay.
How did you end up getting into ministry?
Oh, that's kind of a funny question. So I grew up in a Missouri Synod Lutheran church, so I never saw a woman in leadership do what I do, like here at Faith and what I've done at other churches. So it never occurred to me to be a pastor. I did my undergrad degree at UW-Madison, and I actually triple majored. That sounds really ambitious.
It does.
It's totally not.
Double majoring was ambitious for me, so triple majoring seems daunting.
It was super selfish. So it was English, history, and medieval studies, and the only reason is I wanted to go on the study abroad program to England, and they had a history majors exchange program. So I had already declared as an English major, but I declared myself a history major so I could apply for the exchange program, and then I got it. Mm-hmm. But I love medieval stuff, so most of my English classes and art classes and languages and history were all qualified for the medieval studies. So when I came back and met with my advisor for senior year, she said, you're like 2 classes away from triple majoring. I'm like, really? So I just happened to take French and I just happened to take Latin. So anyway, I there you have it.
How do you just happen to take Latin and French? Did you trip on the way into the classroom building and land in Latin?
I took French in high school, and so you just continue. It's, okay. And then I just thought it would be fascinating to take Latin, and it really was. They taught us how to swear in Latin, though. I don't know, sketchy schools, but anyway, it was great, and I just assumed I was going to go on to teach. Like I had in my mind that I was going to be a college professor, and I had been working at Covenant Pines Bible Camp in the summers all through college, and after I graduated, I had one more summer at Pines, and I got 1 by 1 4 rejection letters come through the mail while I was up for staff training week, and it was really devastating. It was the first time I had reached for something graduate school and not gotten it, and that causes you to recalibrate a lot of things. And by the end of the summer, came this opportunity to go to North Park, and I thought, yeah, I could do that. And I guess I was thinking I would do camping ministry. It was the only kind of ministry I knew. Mm-hmm. And when I started there was a church that asked if I would come part-time do youth ministry with them so I could take their high schoolers to the national conference, which was called CHIC at the time. It's not called Unite. But anyway, that's how I got into youth ministry. So I started doing youth ministry first for 13 years, and then Plymouth Covenant Church called and asked me to consider their children's position. I said, why are you calling me? I'm a youth pastor. They're like, well, we got your name from somebody, and will you look at it? And so we just thought, well, we'll enter the process and see where it goes. And next thing I knew, I was doing children's ministry at Plymouth for 15 years, and then came here. So it was just a series of that door closes, this one opens, close, open, and you just go,
And always unexpected, as God is almost always.
And I remember my dad, this will make you laugh because, you do ministry. My dad's big concern was he didn't think that being a pastor would be challenging enough. Is that cute?
Okay. I don't get that logic, but
you have to understand, my dad wasn't a Christian. He didn't become a Christian until I was in senior year of high school.
Okay.
So he grew up kind of agnostic he grew up Methodist, but he became agnostic through his college years. And he's a big intellectual, so he just thought it wasn't going to be intellectually challenging for me.
But
he thinks differently now. So,
yes.
Anyway, that's how I got into ministry.
Yeah, and then so then how did you get from Plymouth Covenant to Faith Covenant?
Yeah, my years at Plymouth Covenant were fantastic. Like, literally, my kids grew up at Plymouth Covenant. Emma was in kindergarten when we started there. Mateo was in the nursery. And so it was a great place to land as a family and to do ministry. And that church grew exponentially. The ministry grew. Things shifted and changed. And then I think as a whole, children's ministry started to trend toward family ministry, recognizing we had a growing generation of parents that didn't really know what it looked like to disciple their kids. A lot of them hadn't been discipled themselves or hadn't grown up in the church. And it was a whole different starting place for helping families and kids grow in Jesus. And so I felt like God was calling me in one direction. Plymouth was full steam ahead in the same direction they had been in. And it just was sort of this diverging of paths. And I was feeling the discontent of that. And it just took a while before I finally heard from God, that's okay. I'm calling them to one thing and I'm calling you to something else, and that's okay. And so then I felt like I could open myself up to another opportunity. I guess I was sort of thinking if I left Plymouth, it would be because I hated it. It had to be like a bad thing, they're bad. And so this permission to realize, no, they're great. They're a great church. They're doing fantastic ministry, but God was just calling me out of that, and then to here. And so that was the landing point, and I'm super grateful. It's this church aligns with my philosophy for ministry in this season better than Plymouth did when I left. So.
And so how would you describe your role here, what you do here at Faith Covenant?
Yeah, so I was brought on as a children's pastor in the middle of COVID. So, this has just been odd.
Great time to just jump into new things, right?
And actually, Faith wasn't meeting in person when I started here. They started like a month, maybe a month or two after I came. So it's just a whole lot of challenge to try to do ministry for people you haven't met. Yeah. You don't know who they are. They don't know who you are. And so trying to get to know families who were staying in the virtual space and still are, and other families who are here in person, and who are the volunteers and all that kind of stuff. It was just work in a really kind of odd way, like an odd onboarding experience, but good still. And just trying to look at what Faith's history has been with kids and families and where we needed to go. But every time I asked that question, it didn't really seem to matter who I asked it of. The answer I got was, well, you can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. I was like, freedom. Okay, can I really do whatever I want? I'm not quite sure. And the rule of thumb they bang into your head when you switch churches is don't change anything for a year. It's like ministry suicide if you go in and fruit basket upset and change everything. Right. Yeah, that's what Faith was giving me permission to do. Yeah. And so I was kind of like, I don't think I can do this, And
well, I think that's in part just because everything was changing anyway.
Right.
Like regardless of whether who it was.
Yep.
It was in the midst of COVID, everything was changing anyway.
Yeah.
So
it was a rethink across the board in all ministry sectors. Children and family ministries was particularly challenging because we can't do anything unless an adult gets a kid in front of us, whether that's in person or in front of a TV screen or a computer screen or whatever. And so there was that extra added challenge to trying to do ministry in that strange season that we all lived through. Plus, our parents of children were super overloaded with online school and the back and forth, and I have to take a week off because my kid was exposed to COVID, and just the family reroute that people experienced and are to some extent still experiencing just really changed their capacity to engage. So it's not even the desire to engage, but it's the capacity.
Yeah.
And we spent 2 years changing our rhythms and picking and choosing, and some things weren't available to us, so we stopped doing them, and now we don't do them, right? So it's trying to get people sort of back in the rhythm. So that's a little bit what I'm doing, is just trying to still get to know kids and families, still get to know the strength of our volunteer team, and they're fantastic, just fabulous, and build a new direction and kind of get a new vision. And in this interim period without a youth pastor, to include youth ministry as a piece of that sort of strategic vision work too, of from birth through high school, what are we doing, and making sure that every step of the way it makes sense, and every step of the way we're partnering with families. I recognize, at best, maybe I get 40 hours a year with somebody's kid.
Yeah.
Between a Sunday morning and a Wednesday night. But parents have 3,000 hours.
Yeah.
It's not even comparable. So for me to try to do ministry in a vacuum with just children and not include the family piece is, it really has led us to where we are now, which is a whole generation of kids walking away from church and not coming back to it. Mm-hmm. So I definitely think there's a partnership there. I think our parents are overwhelmed. I think the church can come alongside that and help. That's stuff I love to do. I love communicating with parents, talking with parents, and sort of helping them see that this faith stuff isn't really as complicated as it feels like it is.
Yeah.
Right? Helping your kids think about Jesus, talk about Jesus, include Jesus in their everyday, and the everydayness of life is actually easier than we think. Mm-hmm. And when you can communicate that, you can visibly see parents relax.
Yeah.
And that feels like a big win to me. So.
Yeah. Anytime people are feeling relaxed, that's a step in the right direction.
Right. Well, especially when we're all vibrating up here still, with just the stress of life as it is. And we feel incompetent. I think that's just the human condition. You feel like you're not good enough in almost any arena of life. And so if somebody come alongside you and can say, actually, you are good enough.
Yeah.
Right? You are the right person for your children to know and love Jesus. God set it up that way.
Yeah.
Right? You have what it takes to lead your kids to Christ. That whole conversation, that partnership between the church and home is, I think, is really beautiful. Mm. And big surprise, it was God's plan from the beginning, right?
Shocker.
So, wow. When we do things God's way, it works. What?
What a novel concept.
So weird. Anyway, that was a long answer to your
that's great.
question, but yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of what you were saying is kind of just talking about what we talk about on the podcast as discipleship. You're really talking about families discipling kids. And so what are some of the things that we're offering families this year, starting this fall? So let's maybe talk about Sunday mornings first.
Sure.
What are we doing Sunday mornings to help empower families and help kids grow closer to Jesus?
Yeah. So looking at this partnership, there are certain things that parents can do at home, or grandparents for that matter, or any other caregiver or adult caregiver can do in a home setting
uncles,
that
aunts.
The church can't replicate. Mm-hmm. And there are things that I can do at church that you'd have a hard time replicating at home. So that's where you try to capitalize on this partnership. So one of the things, the girl hour classes, right? Mm-hmm. Sunday school, in old terms or whatever, but to have age graded classes starting from birth and going on up through our adults is important. That's a place where the church can provide some good age-specific learning. Mm-hmm. So when you're thinking about kids, you've got preschoolers learning at a preschool level, elementary kids learning at an elementary level, and digesting the stories of Scripture in the right ways. For our preschoolers, it's really the themes. You want them to know that they're made by God, that they're loved, and that Jesus wants to be their friend forever. Mm-hmm. You have a forever friend in Jesus. That's a big deal to preschoolers. So we teach around those themes, mm-hmm. But by the time they get to elementary, we really want to be building this biblical foundation. And whether or not that's happening at home, if it is happening at home, then what we do strengthens that. Mm-hmm. If it's not happening at home, then we're providing a foundation that they otherwise might not have. And so you teach the stories. It's the narrative of the Bible and trying to put them in an order that makes sense, where they get this bigger picture of what it is that God's doing from creation, out to eternity. And how they fit into it, right? Mm-hmm. It's a big story, and we all love story, so it works really well. So just having those age-specific classes on Sunday morning, I think, is super helpful, because then, your kids are with their peer group. That's where they can build some friendships that might really matter down the road in middle school and high school and beyond. And every parent wants the right people around their kid, right? Mm-hmm. And on a Sunday morning, you're going to get the right people around your kid. Yeah. You're going to get some good friends around them, and you're going to get some really great teachers and volunteers around them too. So I think, and at the same time, we've got stuff for adults. So we do have we'll have a parenting focus class again this fall. That one's going to be looking at what Lifeway did a research project back in 2016, and then evaluated their data and came out with a book. And it highlights the 10 characteristics that are the top influencers for lifelong faith. So we're going to look at those 10 characteristics with our parents and help them imagine how they can incorporate those things in the life of their home, so that they're positioning themselves well as a family to grow and follow Christ. So we'll have that class. But there are other options for adults too on Sunday morning. So that's one way that I think we're coming alongside kids and families on Sunday. And then worship, of course. I know this might feel still like a little bit of a controversial call. We had last year elementary kids in worship for the full service. And then this summer we switched and we've had them coming out at the message time. And the reason why we did that is because we didn't have a grow hour in the summer. So we didn't have any contact time with them unless we brought them out of worship.
Sure.
So we've opted to do that so we would have that contact time with them. But now when we transition back to fall, the contact time goes back to the grow hour at 9 o'clock, which means our elementary kids will go back to being in worship for the full service at 10:30. There's a really important reason for that. And I know it takes time to learn those patterns and for kids to feel comfortable in the sanctuary, for parents to feel comfortable having their kids in the sanctuary and all that. And I just would encourage people to keep working on it, keep sticking with it, because when your elementary kids realize that they're an important part of the body of Christ, that's gold.
Yeah.
Right? Like in terms of feeling like they're an important part of what's happening here at Faith specifically, but the larger picture of God's kingdom. And that's the primary reason for having kids in the worship service. So they learn the language of the people, so to speak, but they see their parents worshiping, but they also see the person across the aisle and the person over there, and all generations mixed together, and they're hearing some teaching. Now, is every kid going to grab a hold of every part of the service the way an adult would?
No.
Of course not. But it's getting in there somewhere. I will never forget, my kids went through worship growing up, and we allowed them to bring a sketchbook with them, and their favorite coloring instruments. Mateo's were colored pencils. And he was maybe first or second grade, and he would put the seat of the down and kneel in front of it and use it like a desk, and he would draw. So his back is to the platform. But the whole time, he if the pastor said something funny, he would laugh. If the pastor said,
so he's listening.
Take a look at the screen, he would turn and look. And I was always fascinated because he totally looked so disconnected, but he heard what was going on, and it was filtering in. And, I'll never, one time, I don't even remember what the pastor said, but he said something, and Mateo muttered, "That's not true," under his breath. So he really was engaging the service, even though it looked like he wasn't.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we underestimate what our kids can do. Will they love every worship service? Probably not. But I mean, to be honest, as an adult, maybe you don't love every worship service either, So yeah. I just... I implore all of us to stick with it, to really work to incorporate our elementary kids. Parents, don't be afraid to bring them and learn how to do that hour together well. And if you need help, if you need resource or coaching on that, that's what I'm here for. So I'm happy to come alongside people.
Well, I know some parents are concerned about my kid's not quiet. They're at an age where they're a baby and they cry or whatever.
Yeah.
And I know they think that that's maybe disruptive. But for me, when I'm on stage, whether I'm preaching or doing announcements, and I hear a young kid, I'm just glad they're there.
Yeah.
I'm not thrown off. I'm not upset that that's happening. I'm just like, this is what talking to a family with a family looks like.
Yeah.
And that's normal. So if your kids aren't 100% quiet, that's okay.
I think we just need to let go of that standard. They're not wired to be that way. I don't know. We shouldn't expect it. They can use an indoor voice, and so that's maybe how you coach. But I just think it's beautiful. And I think when kids aren't present in the service, as adults, we miss something. They just carry a natural curiosity with them and a natural wonder that we don't hold on to as tightly as adults, now that we're so mature, right? But our kids have it, and they ask questions and they notice things, and it can lead to really rich discussion in the car ride home or at the dinner table or wherever it percolates up in their life. But man, I think it's worth it, and that's why we made that change. That was one of those, you can do whatever you want to do. And I said, really? Can I? And that was one change I asked for. And Pastor Brad, very supportive of it. And I think as a whole, it seems the congregation has embraced it really well. But if there are still some people who are like, I'm not sure I love this, just just keep going with us. And I think the fruit is going to be worth it. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So that's Sunday morning. So just to briefly recap Sunday mornings, we have Grow Hour with age-appropriate classes for the kids, students, and then also options for adults, specifically with parenting and grandparenting as well, in terms of doing family discipleship.
That's right.
So that's Sunday morning, and then
also I should say during the worship service we do have nursery and preschool.
Yes.
So that's available as usual. It's just the elementary kids that are in service. Yeah.
So that's Sunday mornings, and then we also, Wednesday evening is a big part of our fall programming, or just programming throughout the year. And so this year we're doing something different that you've maybe heard us talk about, but we're doing Awana Together.
Yep.
What is that?
What is
that
thing?
Why are we doing it? Because I didn't I know Awana's been around for a long time, but I didn't grow up with that, so I don't really know what Awana is and what's Awana Together.
Yeah. So Awana is a kids discipleship program. It's got a strong evangelism outreach component to it as well. It's basically age segregated. So there's a preschool handbook, and then younger elementary and older elementary. So older elementary meaning 3rd through 6th grade, but at our church it'll be 3rd through 5th. And so there are books that they work through, and the purpose of the books is just you're really learning spiritual disciplines without realizing that's what you're doing. You're learning how to find things in your Bible. You're learning how to memorize scripture, learning how to pray, learning what it is that missionaries do and why they do it, learning about why it's important to obey your parents. There's just a whole string. You're memorizing the books of the Bible, and it's just in little bite-sized chunks as they learn and grow. And I think it's a great tool. Is it the only tool that you can use for discipleship? No, but I think it's a fantastic tool. They also couple that handbook work with real fun time in the gym, playing games and that kind of thing. We don't have a gym, but we'll simulate something. And then a big group, sort of a big group time as well. So the church that I was at, Plymouth Covenant, is a church that has had Awana for over 25 years as a kids ministry. And as we were going through and finding this real gap or need to come alongside parents better and help them know what their role is in developing their kids' faith, we tried a gazillion things, and that would be a whole separate podcast. But the short of it is, the only thing we didn't try to leverage was Awana, and we thought, well, what if we did this? And so we tried it as a pilot, and then decided to move forward, having Awana as a family ministry program, not a kids ministry program. We called it Family Awana in the pilot, and found that the word family was limiting, and so we changed it to Awana Together. So we do Awana Together is the idea, and getting rid of that family word kind of opens it up, like everybody can come and be a part of this thing.
So grandparents can come with their kids, or guardians with foster kids, or whatever. I
had a nanny come with the kids she was nannying.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So whoever the committed caregiver is bringing the kids, kids plural, that's it. So basically, they'll still do the handbooks, but they'll do most of that handbook work at home. In the kids program, they would have a team, and they would have a team leader. And when they came on Wednesday nights, they would say their verses or the work that they had to share in their book. They would share it with their leader, who would then sign off on their books. What we do in Awana Together is empower parents or caregivers to be the leader. So you work in these books in your own time at home, and when your kids are ready, they say their stuff, and if they've done it right, you sign off on it. And we do coach our parents on how to do that, so that they have some insight. And so that mostly happens off-site, not here in the building. So when they come on Wednesday night, we're going to start in the sanctuary, everybody all together. We're going to do some worship with some music videos, because I'm not a musician and I can't lead live music. You wouldn't want me to, but I will coach us through the videos. They're fun. So we'll do a little bit of worship, and that's great because it's a chance for kids to worship with their parents, and we got that feedback from both our kids and our parents that they really liked that. And then it's usually me. I teach a Bible story, right, to the kids, purposefully to the kids. No apology. We're not trying to include the parents in this, but you're in the sanctuary listening in. The beauty of that is twofold. One, you get a chance to see what it is your kids are cognitively able to do and understand when it comes to Scripture. So as I teach, and the way that I teach shows you what what it looks like in the Sunday school classroom that you're not in because you're in some other part of the building. But on Wednesday night, you're there. And so parents are really getting sort of coached or mentored on how to share scripture with their kids right in lifetime. The other great benefit is it's a shared experience now. So versus Sunday school, I could tell you, we did the story of David and Goliath, but you don't actually know what I taught. You don't actually know what your kids did or interacted. And maybe some of our kids share that information, but probably most of them don't when they go home. But now you've had the shared experience that you can continue to talk about all week long, right? Your kid's going to ask a random question while you're standing at the bus stop. Someone's going to stall bedtime by going back to Wednesday night. It's beautiful. Embrace all of it. But when your kids ask that question then about, well, how come David was so young and he had to fight this big giant? You heard the story too. And so now you can engage. And if you happen to be someone who hasn't grown up with a Bible background, maybe your parents didn't go to church, you didn't go to church, it doesn't matter. Right? You're on ground zero with your kids, learning right alongside them. And these handbooks, you can pick up and use. You don't have to have any prior knowledge of Jesus or the Bible or anything to participate in this ministry. That's why I think it's so brilliant. And so anyway, we'll do that big group time, the teaching, and then we could do 45 minutes of age-specific programming. So our preschoolers will go to preschool room. They'll get their own Bible teaching with puppets. It's so super fun. Like, who doesn't like a puppet?
Side note, my
maybe you don't.
Previous church, the church I grew up in, the church was called Community of Joy, but for 5th and 6th graders for a few years, the Wednesday night programming was a ministry called Puppets of Joy, where we got taught how to do puppetry with the whole thing, and we'd prepare little skits. I have not done this in years. Literally, the only thing I remember is your hand opens for the mouth once for every syllable. That's how you most accurately do that. That's more than I do. Yeah. Well, now you know.
Here's the
I've transferred all my knowledge.
Preschoolers don't even care. You don't even have to have the pretense of hiding behind something. You can just have the puppet on your hand. They'll go with it. So anyway, they'll get their age-appropriate Bible story teaching. Same thing with our elementary kids. They're actually going to get a mix of, sometimes it'll be a games and activity, sort of more active activities. And some weeks it'll be like a craft or a science project or something like that. So it'll be sort of a mixed bag of just spending time with their peers and having fun. And then the parents will stay in the sanctuary, parents, grandparents, all the adults. And we'll just do some encouraging and equipping. We'll find out at the beginning of the year what you guys want help on, where you want some resource, where you want some encouragement, and we'll put some talks behind that. And there'll be some Wednesdays when we won't have anything that we present to parents. Instead, we'll have the cafe open. You can go on and get some snacks and a cup of coffee and sit and socialize. Or if you need a moment by yourself, you can stay in the sanctuary and be introverted. I don't mind. Those nights are for you guys. So I think there's a good balance there, because at the end of a long work day, sometimes it is hard to receive content. So I'm very much aware of that, and we'll be gentle with you, I promise. And then at the very end of the night, for 10-ish minutes, we bring all the kids back into the sanctuary, kind of reconvene our family groups, and do sort of a sending out or a blessing before they go. If we've taught anything during the parent time, like how to pray with your kids or how to bless your kids, we'll actually build that into the closing, and parents will get a chance to put that idea into practice right away. It's really beautiful. When we did the blessings at Plymouth, it was really the parents who were supposed to say blessing over their kids, but what happened then was all the kids turned around and said blessings over their parents.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what is happening? I'm on stage crying, because honestly it was so moving to see these preschoolers grab their parents' faces and, the Lord bless you, they're yelling at him, and they were cute. So in earnest. And anyway, so it's all practical, it's all usable right here, right now. You don't have to come in with a theology background for any of it. And if you can't make it every week, nobody's going to shame you for that. We surely would love you every Wednesday. You're going to get some natural breaks. We don't meet at MEA week. We don't meet over the holidays. Those kinds of things. So there really is kind of a nice rhythm to what we do on Wednesday night as well. And that's it. It's 6:15 to 7:45, and you can register on the church website, or I think through Faith Connect you could also register. There is a cost. It's not. I think fairly minimal for a year-long program, and it really just helps us break even on the cost of the books and the vests and the awards that go with the verses that kids are memorizing. But if money's an issue, just say
Let us
so.
know.
We have scholarships, full or partial, whatever you need. We will make it free. If you,
Yep.
And if you want to just come and try it out without registering first, people can do that as well. If you're like have a hard time committing to things, there's so many of us out here. So just come and check it out. Come by yourself. Come with your kids, and if you like what you see, then you can register. I'm okay with that too. So we're really here to come alongside families, and it's interesting because in the surveys that I've read recently, a lot of families don't think of the church as a resource, but we are. We're a resource for you, for your family, for your kids, in so many ways. And I wish more people were aware of that and took advantage of the partnerships that we can offer. So anyway, Awana Together. I'm a little bit biased because I designed the program, but I think it's a fantastic program. I really do. And our families at Plymouth sure enjoyed it, and we got good feedback. And so anyway.
What I'm hearing is, we talk on our podcast about discipleship being with God, with others, with God's word, and this is all three of those things wrapped in one. But for families, for adults and kids to kind of do this together, because I think sometimes when we talk about discipleship, we just inherently think of adults doing it because the scripture is all stories of Jesus mostly interacting with adults and discipling adults. So we don't always think of what does that look like to do that with kids. But Jesus also said, let the kids come to me.
Yes.
Jesus was very much focused on, no, the kids should be here right now.
Yeah. And what we're doing with kids when they're younger is so important. I mean, there's just there are two big periods of brain development. One's in the preschool years, one's in the middle school, high school years, where your brain is just going crazy, making connections and everything. So those are windows of opportunity for teaching and for leading. And what we have found is most people come to faith between the ages of 4 and 14. But if they're going to walk away from faith, they do it before age 18. So in these early childhood years, when kids are a more receptive audience, and easier to lead in some ways, which is both a privilege and scary at the same time. We can introduce them to Jesus, but to get them to hold on to Jesus, well, that's where what happens in the middle school, high school years is so important. So if you've built this good foundation as a family, you're in a position to help them through those questioning years that come in middle school and high school and really wrestle with the faith they've been given up to that point and make it their own. That's the disconnect. If kids don't have that space to make the faith their own, they will walk away, because why would they stay? So that's the work that we all get to do, and we're all called to it in the Bible. Everybody, whether you have kids or not, it is, as adults, it is our responsibility to raise the next generation for Christ.
Yep.
It's in everybody all in. So, yeah.
Yeah. And part of what I'm hearing you talk about, too, is just kind of how this, in some ways, challenges the role of the church versus the role of the family in spiritual formation of a kid. Because I think I grew up in a generation, and I think many of us did, where church programming for kids was teaching you Bible stories. And that's good, and we do that. But what you're talking is a step further of getting the families involved, or the parents or the caregivers involved, in saying, we're all in this together. We're helping you to teach the faith. We're helping you disciple when we're not here, when your kids aren't here.
Yeah. I can give you an example of that. It was Kara Powell and some other people at Fuller Institute years ago came up with the sticky faith idea. Are you familiar with it?
I think I've read one of the books. I think I might have one of them back there somewhere.
The idea is that in addition to parents, by the time your kids are in middle school, high school, you want them to have 5 other Christian adults around them that have like some kind of significant relationship. And to be intentional about that, like as parents, what other adults can I get involved in the life of my children? Could be grandparents, could be a coach, could be a Sunday school teacher, a pastor. I mean, there's so many people to choose from. Yep, for sure, all of that. And that happened for my kids. They had confirmation mentors growing up. They had small group leaders in middle school. They had small group leaders in high school. They had favorite Sunday school teachers from when they were younger. They had our worship arts pastor, just like she didn't have her own children, and so she just poured into my kids. And she kept a basket of goodies in her office, which, was like a magnet for children. But all of it, And when Emma hit college, she had a season in the spring when she just was really overwhelmed. She had a lot of stuff that was due. She was fighting migraine headaches and just having a really hard time. And she reached out to her 5, actually 6.
Oh.
She sent an email to these women.
Overachiever, 6.
I know. And she sent this email to these women, and she copied me on it, which is how I know that she sent it, saying, hey, this is happening in my life this week, and I really could use your prayers. And then I got to watch these women respond to her, and encourage her and actually type out prayers in their response and give her scripture verses, and then check back in on her like a week or 2 weeks later. How you doing? How did that test go?
Yeah.
And I just was like, that's it. This is it.
Yep. That's what you want.
You want your kid when they step out of your home to know that they've got you to fall back on, but they've got some other people too.
Yeah.
And that was just a beautiful, real tangible example of that when I saw that happen for her. And again, it was her confirmation mentor, her middle school small group leader, her high school small group leader, this worship arts pastor, and a couple others. So, this is so great, right?
Yeah, no, that's
so
awesome
that's
stuff.
what the church can do. We can come alongside your kids. We can come alongside your family. We can help make sense of it all. We can help equip you when you feel like you're don't have enough. We can fill in the gap. When you feel like you don't know what you're doing, we can help you feel like you know what you're doing. When you're like, I am not adequate, I could say, actually you are.
Yeah.
And it says it right here in the Bible. So that we need that, right? We need each other.
One part of what you're saying too is kind of it's a challenge to me because I don't have kids, but hearing you just kind of reminds me that doesn't mean I'm exempt from helping raise the next generation.
Right.
I'm absolutely a part of that.
Yeah. Well, you're a super involved uncle.
Yeah. I do have 9 nieces and nephews. So yes, I do pour into them as much as I can. But even still, I still have a role in caring for the children of this church, even though I'm not a parent.
Well, and I tell people, whatever your gifts are, I can use them in children's ministry.
Yeah.
And that's not a lie. And that's because children's ministry is kind of like a church within a church in terms of the type of people you need to make it go well. And so even if you don't love being one-on-one with kids, there's still stuff to do, right? Yeah. And if you're good at welcoming people, check-in desk, make people feel welcome when they come in and give kids name tag labels and set them off. And there's just something. There's craft prep during the week. There's events, one-off events during the year. You could say, hey, raise your hand and say, I want to be a part of that. And it doesn't matter how old you are. Sometimes the older we get, the more we discount ourselves from serving in ministry. That's not a thing.
No.
I don't know why we make it a thing, but we don't need to. And even if you're struggling with mobility issues or other challenges, there are still ways that we can involve you in the lives of our kids and families in meaningful ways, right?
Yeah.
And the prayer life, right? Just around all of it, bathe all of it in prayer. That's a great big deal too. So it's an all-in thing.
Yeah.
It's all in. I like it.
Well, I remember a couple from the church I had growing up where their grandkids lived further away from them and our grandparents lived further away from us, so they kind of just became our adoptive grandparents for a while, and that was amazing.
Yeah.
And it's so great to have those kinds of relationships in the church. Where else do you get that?
Well, my kids' friends, even through college, high school and college, have adopted my parents as their grandparents. So, it is, you could just show up. My dad's 81, teaches middle school Sunday school for his church, and has done for years, right? He loves it. So, I think if God's gifted you in any way, it's our job to use our gifts for the kingdom, and it can be done in so many different ways. And so we can help you find your sweet spot, whether it's in children's ministry or someplace else in the church. There's kingdom work to be done.
All right. My last question for you today is, what is your hope for children's or family ministry here at Faith Covenant? Either short-term, long-term, however you want to interpret that.
This is tricky. We are a numbers-driven society.
Yeah.
And so we quickly measure things in numbers. And we say something's successful if this many people showed up for it. Or it would be tempting to look at children's ministry and say, it's successful if we have this many kids in our classrooms. I think COVID has shown us the error of that thinking. It is a useful metric to some extent, but the more useful one is the depth of the relationships that we're helping to foster. And again, the statistic of so many kids abandoning their faith, in their upper high school, early college years. How do we stop that, right? Yeah. Well, we stop that by really investing in these deeper relationships and doing it together as a family of faith. And so that's really my hope, is that we just continue to... This church has a... I don't know. There's a quality to the people here that I've seen in the year and a half I've been here that I really appreciate. And there's so much support for kids and youth and across the generations, right? It's not just the parents of those children who are fans of them, but it's other people too. And when you're in the sanctuary and you make some announcement about kids and people clap, it's like, yep. Oh, you're with me, Yay. It's just, I don't know. We've got something that's worth giving away. I'm actually going to talk about this in my sermon on the 11th. But it is just, I don't know, we shouldn't be quiet about what we're doing. We should be telling people. And as we tell people, we will grow. And so that is a hope, right? You want to see the growth. We do want to see the growth numerically, because that means we're bringing more people into the kingdom. So that is a real thing. But even more than that, I want to grow in the right ways. I don't want to just grow in numbers where we're entertaining people that will allow them to ride on the surface and then fall away from faith when something more interesting pops up or whatever. But to really be foundational and get those deeper relationships and understanding of who God is, who we are, and what He wants us to do in His world. And kids are capable of understanding that, right? You don't have to wait until you're 18 or 22 to have that conversation. With elementary kids, especially middle school kids, they love putting their faith into action. And so when we give opportunities for that, that just cements all of this stuff that we're trying to do together. So when I think about the future, it is growth, but it's not just numerical growth. More than that, it's the depth of our relationships with one another and our relationship with God.
When I think of our church's mission statement of being disciples who make disciples, I think that's most clearly encapsulated in children's ministry, because you have parents or caregivers who are the disciples who are making disciples with their children or their kids they're caring for. And that's it in a nutshell.
Well, you look at the Great Commission and it talks about, go and teach all the nations. Well, if we jump over our children to get to the nations, we've kind of missed something really important, right? So it's from here out. It's not here, jump there. It's everyone you encounter is the nations. And if you look at the Hebrew translation of that word, it really is like nations is like everybody. Yeah. It's all inclusive. And so our kids certainly belong in that word, and just getting in there with them. And they're so naturally evangelistic too. Yeah. Like they'll talk to their friends about Jesus. They just don't have the same barriers in place, most of them. Yeah. That we learn to put in place as adults. And so it's just a beautiful time to invest in them and come alongside them and release them to do what God has so uniquely gifted them to do. And all of that curiosity, all of that wonder helps us to see things in fresh ways too, which we really need. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, I'm very grateful that you're serving in this role. We love having Sarah on staff. She's just a bright light for all of us. And we're just very thankful to have her, and we're thankful to have her today on the podcast. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It was just an honor to talk about things that I love. So.
Yeah. Well, just one last reminder. So, probably a couple. But our children's Sunday morning program launches on September 18th. Yep. And then the Wednesday night program launches on September 28th, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
That is correct.
So those are two very important dates. You don't have to register for the Sunday morning stuff, nope. But we would like registration for the Sunday or the Wednesday programming. And again, if cost is an issue, let us know. We'll get you in the door. Don't worry.
Yeah, so. And the Awana program comes with little uniforms. So like the younger kids have vests that they wear, and the older elementary kids have T-shirts. If you're concerned about size and you happen to order the wrong one, we can make an exchange on Wednesday night and make sure you've got. And they should be good for a couple of years as your kids grow. So the uniform expense will be a one-time thing this year. Handbooks might be every year, depending on how quickly your kids move through. So,
all right.
Anyway.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for being with us today. And thank you all for listening or watching. And we hope you have a great week.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.